Back like we never left. Welcome to episode 226 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for taking this drive home with me on this Wednesday night here in New York. It's raining. There's a little bit of lightning. Haven't heard any thunder, but where there's lightning, thunder can't be far behind, or is it the other way around? We're going to skip past all that promotional jazz once again, and we're going to get right to the guts of the episode. Now, today has been the 42nd anniversary of Ridley Scott's iconic, legendary science fiction masterpiece, Blade Runner. But it is the 37th anniversary of the release date of, if you ask me off the top of my head, what's my favorite war film of all time? It is Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, released June 26th, 1987. Now, it's a movie that I saw, unsurprisingly not in theaters, but I saw it on HBO pretty much when it premiered. I don't remember there being, I know I saw it in 1988 when I was, I believe I was in 9th grade. And it's strange, there are so many movies that had been heavily buzzed when I was a kid that I just didn't get it. Like Blade Runner, which, I don't know, I was disappointed when I first saw it. The movie it was kind of flat. I thought it was boring. I didn't understand it, yada, yada, yada. But Full Metal Jacket, from the first time I saw it, it hit the proverbial masterpiece button. I was just dazzled. I was riveted the whole way through. Even though the general sense is that the film is at its best in the first third, the boot camp sequence. Now, I agree that the boot camp sequence is about as good as cinema can be. It is the strongest 45 minutes of film that I've ever seen within the context of, a movie that is more than just 40 to 45 minutes. But there are people who think the film kind of falls flat or goes slack or isn't as impressive after the boot camp sequence. Well, that's not really a criticism. It's a reality. There's no way, have been no way to sustain the tension of that sequence and the complete madness of what we're presented with. It's something that exists on its own while still being part of the whole of what, as I said, my favorite war movie. Do I think it's the best war movie ever made? Best is very difficult. But it's a film that, despite the brutality, despite the horror of what we are presented with, despite the mind-numbing idiocy of the Vietnam War, in a larger sense, Full Metal Jacket is a Vietnam War movie without being a combat film. Because Vietnam, unfortunately, was about a lot more than combat. It was about the government fucking up and then compounding the fuck-ups by continuing to commit money and time for the narrative, not just the battles, not just whatever our end game was, which was really not much of an end game if we're being honest, but the idea of trying to capture the hearts and minds of American citizens, trying to convince John Q. Public or Jane Q. Public that we were somehow fighting for freedom over here, however that would manifest itself. I don't really know how you make the argument successfully, and as time went on and more young American men were butchered or poisoned by defoliants such as Agent Orange, we weren't going to win hearts and minds because we didn't have a clearly defined objective that made any sense. Unlike World War II, stop the fucking Nazis, we want Hitler's head on a fucking platter, and maybe try to save Eastern Europe while we're at it. Vietnam War we were trying to stop the spread of communism because reasons, I guess. Joe McCarthy, communist, bad, right? Joe McCarthy wanted to root out the communists, but we needed to stop the communists in Southeast Asia. I mean, the whole idea, it's so dumb I wish that there had been TV talk shows back in the day. People have been screaming screaming at each other. There was never a reason to do what we did. It never existed. It was a war that was fought in an erroneous way. We never should have been there. No American lives should have been lost. And I remember when I was a kid, the tally was over 58,000. It's way more than that now. They undershot it. Now, Stanley Kubrick doesn't get into that in Full Metal Jacket, but he does get into the complete idiocy of what the Vietnam War was, where our soldiers, there are times they didn't know who they were shooting. Were they shooting the people we're supposed to protect? Or are they shooting the people that we're not supposed to protect, that we're supposed to actually try to, I guess, kill? I don't know. War is hell. There's a character in the film that sums up just the horrifying idiocy, the impossible dumbness of the Vietnam War and what the United States was doing there. So there is an actor named Tim Colceri, Colceri. In the original iteration, when Stanley Kubrick was getting ready to make his movie, Tim Colceri was going to play Gunnery Sgt Hartman. The role famously played by the late, great Erney, who was a real-life drill instructor, but he also turned out to be a very strong film actor. We saw him in movies like Seven with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt. He's very good in that. From the same year, he registers in Dead Man Walking, which Susan Sarandon won the Best Actress Award. A wonder, whatever you think of Susan Sarandon, a really good film. Tim Robbins' direction is so good, and he got a great performance out of Erney in that film. Like, there was actually even some Oscar buzz for him. He was so solid as one of the parents of the character Sean Penn plays, one of his victims. Tim Colceri was going to play that part of Gunnery Sgt Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. Erney was on set, and it was always Kubrick's plan, because Erney had done some acting as well previously, but he'd wanted to hire a so-called regular actor. Stanley wouldn't have said it that way, but that was the idea. And but Erney was on set as a technical advisor, and Kubrick marveled at the way that he could rip off 20 straight minutes of insults without any notes. Just go to town on everybody. If you were 6'4", if you were tall, he had 5 minutes on what a piece of shit you were because you're tall. If you were short, he had it. If you were chubby, he had 15 minutes. Whatever it was, the guy was a machine. As luck would have it, Tim Colceri fell ill. I don't know if it was the flu, whatever it was, he was going to be out of commission for more than a day or so. And Stanley Kubrick, one of the many ironies of the genius that was Stanley Kubrick, is he was somebody that was okay working for a week to get one scene correct, do hundreds of takes of 15 seconds, 30 seconds. But he didn't like when his time was wasted, because he had a process. And as they used to say about Stanley Kubrick, he didn't always know what he wanted, but he knew what he didn't want when he saw it. But in this instance, he felt they didn't really have time to wait for Tim to get back. And he made a little bit of a deal with himself. He said, you know what? I love the idea of giving Erney a shot. Let's see how this works out if he plays the part that I had earmarked for Tim. And if it doesn't work, well, when Tim is better, we'll do the best we can. But he also told himself, if this does work, I'm going to make sure Tim gets another part, because he really liked him. On a personal level, he liked him as, as a person. He liked him as an actor. As you know, Erney was perfectly cast, even though he was not the first choice. And what he does in that boot camp sequence is, it's almost impossible. It's not something he could have ever learned in an acting class. But Tim Colceri, who did not end up playing Gunnery Sgt Hartman, he is a gunner on a chopper, a helicopter, that the main character, Matthew Modine, as Private Joker, his real name is Davis in the book, The Short Timers. We actually see his name Davis once in the film during one of the many training exercises where the recruits have their gear on, and they have like a sweater top on, and you can briefly see it for a couple of seconds that his name is Davis, which was a nod to the book. Now, maybe Kubrick shot plenty of footage where he was identified as Davis, but he is never called Davis in the movie. We just know his name is Davis in the film because of what I just said. But there's a scene in the film after the boot camp sequence. It's about, I guess, about halfway through the movie, where Private Joker is with another character called Rafter Man. I don't remember the name of the actor, but they are photojournalists. Now, they have a rifle in their hands. They're seeing some heavy shit out there, but their primary function is to try to take pictures, if there's, record video, but take pictures to do what? Try to recapture the hearts and minds. We're starting to lose the public relations war. We got to get it back. Whatever nonsense they're told. So they're on this chopper, and the character played by Tim Colcheri is shooting at random people in a field. And Matthew Modine sees what's going on, and he asks a very logical question. How do you know that you're not shooting the people we're supposed to protect? He says it doesn't really matter. I mean, when they're 6 feet under, who gives a fuck? Or words to that effect. And Matthew Modine's character, who is not opposed to killing, he is very self-aware. He is a person who has a Born to Kill button on his helmet and a peace symbol on his uniform. So, as he puts it, it's about the duality of man, that he can be both. He can be a peace-loving, and probably was a peace-loving radical type, hippie type, before the war, but now this is Vietnam. There's no friends out here. It's every man for himself. Maybe you get a couple of buddies in your platoon, but maybe you'll want to kill them too, right? The gunner on the chopper is just killing people. He does not know who they are. If that is a situation where you have a rifle, a machine gun in your hands, and you cannot positively identify those are the bad guys, you don't fire. He doesn't care. And Matthew Modine, without really making a face, can't believe what he's seeing. And he asks another very logical question. How do you shoot women and children? And the Tim Colcheri character, the gunner, shouts, it's easy. You just don't lead them as much. Boy, it went right over his head. Or he deliberately answered the question like an asshole, like a fucking murderous scumbag. But this is not far-fetched. That he's being asked a philosophical question, which is a real question. And we saw it in movies like American Sniper, where Bradley Cooper's, I can't remember his name, but the character that Bradley Cooper played, the United States military's most successful sniper. There are scenes where he is supposed to take a shot, but he hesitates because he thinks that he might kill a kid. And that is, no matter how good of a soldier you are, if you have a heart, if you're not a sociopath, if you're not a murderous psychopath, you can't just pull the trigger and murder a 4-year-old child. Can't do it, I'm sorry. Matthew Modine was asking that question. Even if, let's say these are the bad guys, how the fuck do you shoot an unarmed woman and a kid? And he simply says, you just don't lead them as much. Meaning they don't move as fast. So you position the gun, your aim is going to be a little different. He answers the question in the most horrifying manner possible. And this concept, the true horror of war, where you're supposed to be doing one thing and you end up doing something else entirely, and maybe committing dozens of murderous homicidal acts. Oh, but he's a good soldier. We've seen that in other movies, other Vietnam films, such as Brian De Palma's Casualties of War with the aforementioned Sean Penn, Michael J. Fox, John Leguizamo, John C. Reilly, tremendous cast. In that movie, there is an idea that if Michael J. Fox's character doesn't fall into line, one of his own might take a shot at him, might put him out of his commission. Or the soldiers are so deep in the shit, and there are stretches of the film where Sean Penn's character He is a great soldier, but the guy is twisted. And he has convinced himself that, well, we're allowed to do this because we do that. It's not how it works. It's not Weight Watchers. You don't get a certain number of points and then you can do, no, sorry, no. No, thank you. We're all set here. In a movie Platoon, there is that. There is more of the same. There is the idea that what if we hit the wrong village? What if we just maimed and murdered 30 people we were supposed to protect? Who gives a fuck? I don't care if they're all dead. Yeah, but you're supposed to be protecting them. I don't give a shit. Who's protecting me? Full Metal Jacket, without being a combat film, shows the chaos of war in a similar fashion to Saving Private Ryan, which does this brilliantly, where you never know what step will be your last. You don't know if you're going to die instantly and probably almost painlessly from a shot to the head, or whether you're going to take one to the gut and bleed to death for a week, or die a horrible death on the field, or be stabbed. Kubrick's entire point, it's not that war is hell. It's not even that it's unnecessary. It's that by transforming young men into perfect soldiers, perfect killing machines, you might end up doing the job a little bit too well, and you'll have a nation of malcontents, assuming that they don't commit capital crimes because you've trained them so well. And that appears to be the entire point of the boot camp sequence. The fantastic Always Fire Vincent D'Onofrio as a character whose name is Lawrence, but he's called Private Pyle after Gomer Pyle. There are so many shots in the film. And yeah, some of it you could say is Kubrick kind of showing off, because his command of the form is almost unlike any other filmmaker. There are moments in that film that could not have come from any other director in history other than Stanley Kubrick. Through the horror and the chaos, the madness of war, you do have certain soldiers, and this is the reality. There are certain soldiers who actually are going to die trying to do the right thing. Not take a shot if they think they could hit a civilian. If, heaven forbid, they think they can hit somebody who we're supposed to protect, kill a kid. But there are a lot of people who, under extreme duress, they're going to crack. And it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it okay. But it's understandable. The gunner on that chopper, maybe he was always a sociopath, but maybe he was broken by what he's already seen in war. We don't know. And it doesn't make it any better that there were, I can't even tell you how many hundreds of thousands of young American men who saw active combat and who were in the shit in World War II and saw things that traumatized them and turned them into different people. At least that war was for something. There was never a path to victory in Vietnam, or a victory that would have amounted to anything of substance. For the average person over here, all those people having their lives either ended, impaired, or have to carry trauma for the rest of their days, seeing villages burned down, screaming children who had nothing to do with the fight, burning alive. Kubrick, born in the Bronx, but who spent most of his life in England. He shot what was supposed to be Vietnam. What was it? I think it was an old gasworks facility, if I'm not mistaken. He wasn't going to tell a conventional war film. Now, Oliver Stone's Platoon, which came out the previous year, is closer to a conventional war film. There are so many different kinds of war films. There are war films which are combat films about a specific war, a specific theater in that war. Then there are films like Full Metal Jacket, which take place at a specific time. In this case, it leads to the Tet Offensive, a specific time within a specific war in one area. but it's not really about war. It's about war's dehumanizing effects. It's about the military taking the humanity away from their soldiers in the hope of maybe saving their life. But there is so much in the film that you can't shake. Just as when you watch Saving Private Ryan and you think of some of the more powerful segments in that film, things near the end and the attempted taking of Omaha Beach at the beginning, there are a ton of moments in Full Metal Jacket that you will not ever get out of your head. And I don't want to spoil anything, but the film does close on the platoon, which counts 2 people who we've followed since basic training, Private Joker and Private Cowboy, played really well by Arliss Howard, who looked like he was going to have a bigger career than he ended up having, but he's very strong in this film. But the movie climaxes with what is supposed to be the Tet Offensive, and the platoon that Private Joker and his buddy, fellow journalist, photojournalist, Rafterman, they end up running with Cowboy's platoon. And they are targeted by a sniper who has a rifle that can go from long range, and the person appears to be an expert sniper, like I said with American Sniper and Bradley Cooper, an expert marksman. And they have no idea where the sniper is. And they are just getting picked off. And it is terrifying, and it's beyond anything you can imagine. But when we find out who the sniper is, it adds more terror, horror, and sadness. And seeing it not that long ago, Full Metal Jacket, I'm reminded of a moment from a terrific film from about 20 years ago with Don Cheadle. Nick Nolte was in it, and Joaquin Phoenix in smaller roles, Hotel Rwanda. Joaquin Phoenix plays an American soldier who's there. He's kind of in a peacekeeping, not a combat scenario, but he's in kind of a peacekeeping unit. And he says something to the effect of, sorry, I just got to get this key out here. He says something to the effect of, people in America will see a child holding a rifle, holding an Uzi, learning how to use a grenade, for example. And Americans, their first instinct will be, it's horrible to think of an 8-year-old with a gun, or what the fuck is an 8-year-old doing with a weapon like that? Now, I ask myself the question, why would an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old need a gun? What are they doing with a gun? Well, it's probably not by choice. In fact, I would say 100% it's not by choice. They have a gun because they're protecting their family. They are trying to keep marauders away, whatever it might be. That's why. Peasant boy, a civilian. Well, we're trying to protect him. Why does he have a machine gun? Why the fuck is he shooting at us? Well, maybe he thinks that you're going to kill him first. You just bumped off one village to the right. They think that you come for them. Yeah, but we're the good guys. Okay, you want to go tell him that? He might shoot you. The chaos, the terror. That's what Full Metal Jacket is about. The dehumanization. Now, Oliver Stone's Platoon, as I said, is a very good movie. It came out the previous year. It's very disturbing. Performances are amazing, especially Willem Dafoe, Tom Berenger. Charlie Sheen is very solid. Charlie Sheen's character is loosely based on Oliver Stone, the writer-director, his experiences in Vietnam. I've always considered Full Metal Jacket to be a better film. And there were some critics that just didn't get it. Full Metal Jacket only got a couple of Oscar nominations. I think it was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Might have gotten a Best Sound, but it did not get nominated for any of the major awards. And it just shows how fickle the Oscars are. Because The Last Emperor, I mean, Bernardo Bertolucci, one of the all-time masters, great filmmaker, absolute legend. But give me a fucking break, come on. The Last Emperor is not that good. Relative to Full Metal Jacket, come on, be serious. The Full Metal Jacket, I believe, is streaming on Max. At least it was at last count. You can find it probably on other platforms. If you haven't seen it, and I assume if you've gotten this far into the episode, you have seen it. But if you haven't, it is must see. And oddly enough, I consider it to be, despite how disturbing and upsetting and fucking crazy it is Stanley Kubrick's most accessible film to the average film goer. Clockwork Orange, certainly not. Maybe some people would say The Shining. Eyes Wide Shut, certainly not. You know, Dr. Strangelove, certainly not. But it is a movie that, if you consider yourself a fan of movies, it must be seen. And sooner rather than later. I mean, really, the Kubrick filmography it's all must see. There's nothing there that you can miss, whether it's Lolita or, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut, Full Metal Jacket, Barry Lyndon. No one made movies like Kubrick. And you hear that from everyone in the business, from Christopher Nolan on down. Stanley was in a class by himself. He was the man. As Jack Nicholson famously said, I feel that everyone pretty much acknowledges that Stanley was the man. I still feel that underrates him. And if anybody had an axe to grind doing thousands of takes, it would be Jack Nicholson. That he adored Stanley, and he was grateful to have gotten to work with him. Tom Cruise say the exact same thing. Full Metal Jacket. Stanley Kubrick's riveting gut punch of a Vietnam War movie, released on this day, 1987. Starring Matthew Modine, Dorian Harewood, Adam Baldwin, Arliss Howard, and a magnificent, extraordinary, should have been Oscar nominated turn by R. Lee Ermey as Gunnery Sgt Hartman. This has been episode 226 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Wednesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platform such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 227 real soon. Until then, peace.